I hope everybody can see my screen.
Yes, Jackie.
Okay, cool. Okay. So, guys, welcome to a Surat MuleSoft Meetup 40. And the topic for today's meetup is concept of fragments and the watermarking in MuleSoft. So, Ankita Misra is the speaker for today's meetup, and she will going to walk through you through like what is a fragment and how you can create a fragment in the design center. Then she will also explain what is the watermarking and how you can implement the watermarking with a MuleSoft. Okay. So let me start with a safe harbor statement. Both the speaker and the host are organizing this meetup in the individual capacity only. Here, we are not representing any organization or any company here, basically. This presentation is strictly for the learning purpose, and like we are not responsible, we are not holding any responsibility whether this same solution will work for your business requirement. The presentation is not meant for any promotional activities. Then housekeeping, yeah, the recording will be definitely upload to the event page within 24 hours. You can ask the question at any time. I have enabled the mic for everyone, and even you can make use of a chat window to ask the question and try to make the session more and more interactive. And we are looking for the feedback at the end of session, and this will help us to improve for the further sessions or future sessions. So organizer, myself is Jitendra, and I'm working as a senior solution architect the EPM system. And Nitish is not available today. So let me move to the next slide. So speaker for today's meetup is Ankita Misra. So Ankita, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, Jackie. Thank you so much. Hi, my name is Ankita Mishra. I have more than 11 years of experience in the field of training, quality analyst, as a quality analyst, and in customer support. I am currently working in Epicero as a manager technical training. I'm handling all the trainings over there. And I'm currently MuleSoft certified developer, and I also hold an MCPA architect certificate. So, this is all about me. Can we start with the topic of today?
Yeah, you can share your screen and like you
Yes.
can just start with the topic. Let me stop sharing.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Please let me know if my screen is visible, everyone. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So today's agenda is we are going to talk about two different topics basically. The first topic I would like to talk about would be fragments. What are fragments? What are the advantages of fragments? How can we use fragments? Followed by a demonstration. I will show you how to create a fragment and use in your API specifications. Followed by that, we are going to move on to second topic of the day today, which is watermarking. Watermarking, what is watermarking basically in the world of Mule? What is automatic watermarking and what is manual watermarking? Again, followed up by a demonstration where I will show you how to perform both automatic watermarking and manual watermarking in MuleSoft. So before we start off with this particular agenda, I already assume that you guys are well aware of what is Anypoint platform, what is Anypoint Studio, and the basic nitty-gritties of why MuleSoft API-led connectivity approach, right? So please feel free to stop me and ask questions. If you have any questions, I'll be very happy to answer. Okay, so let's begin. Fragments. So before we talk about fragments, let me give you a brief idea about API development lifecycle, which I already assume you might be knowing. API development lifecycle has been categorized into three concentric circles, as you can see it on my diagram, on my screen basically. So the innermost circle is called as the design first. This is called as API design approach. So here in this particular phase, we design our API specification, we simulate it, we create a mocking service out of our design, then we publish it to our exchange to get the feedback of our resources, of our developers and the users who are going to use it. And based on the feedback, we will validate our API specification. And you can see it is represented in circular format. Why circular format? Because it actually represents the iterative way of creating APIs, which means that at any given time, we are free to incorporate the changes and make our API as reusable as it demands to be. So Once my API specification is ready, I move on to the second phase of my API development lifecycle, which is called as development phase, wherein you actually develop and build your API service. Your implementation is built on the basis of what you have designed on your in your API specification. Okay. After this development phase, we move on to the deployment phase. Like in any SDLC, software development lifecycle, right? There is a design part, requirement analysis, design, then you move on to development, and then you move on to deployment. In deployment, you take care of the version control, you make sure that your APIs or your assets are secured, you make sure to deploy your application and make your user, they should be able to register for your application, right? So you give them an option to register for your application, and then you monitor it, analyze it, make sure to troubleshoot the issues if there are any, make sure your application should be able to scale up and down based on the client requirement, and always you should be responsive to your users queries or users concerns. Now, why I'm showing you this API development lifecycle? Because I want to let you know that when you build an API in MuleSoft, we take the design first approach. We actually first create the design part. We first build the API specification, right? Now, while building this API specification, the concept of fragments comes into the picture. So as you can see it over here, API fragments are reusable components of RAML to make the design and build of a reusable API easier and quicker. So API fragments are not the actual API specifications. This is just a piece of code written in a separate API documentation. Now, the purpose of writing that piece of code is that whenever and wherever needed, you can pull out the code which is written in the fragment and you can use it as it is in your actual API specification. So, this actually makes your API fragment a reusable component because it's a separate piece of code. Okay, you can use this particular code in any of the API specifications as and when needed. Okay, any questions till now, guys? Any confusions? Is my pace okay? Am I going too fast or too slow?
No, it's good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah, everybody is fine. Thank you. Thank you.
All good. Yeah.
Yeah, great. So, as I was talking about API fragment, now API fragment is a RAML document which has a version and an identifier. Okay, it will have a version and it will have the identifiers also, but it is not a complete specification itself. It's just a piece of code. I'm repeating it again. It's just a piece of code which can be reused in your API specification whenever it is needed. This actually helps your API specification to be more, you know, uh, to be more. You can change it whenever you need to change your actual API specification because you are not dependent upon the hard coded code which is written in your specification. For example, if I am referring to, let's say, an example. Okay, in my example, in my API specification, I have given example as animal equals to dog. Now, every time when I'm going to run that API specification, my output will be animal equals to dog. Now, let's say I don't want this animal equals to dog every time. I want to make my specification looks good, and I really want my user to understand that this API is not it's not just going to give me one kind of output. It can give me different kinds of output. So what can I do? I can create different API fragments and I can pull them into my API specification and I can keep on changing the examples. So first time when the user is going to run the API mocking service, he will get animal equals to dog. But the next time, maybe if I want to change the output can be changed from animal equals to dog from animal equals to cat. Okay, and this part you do not need to hard code in your actual API specification. This part you can keep it in your fragment and you can keep changing the fragment as and when needed. Okay, so reusable APIs and fragments save a lot of time and resources and accelerates the delivery process as it creates a trend of consistency. Now, for example, I have already created an example file animal equals to dog. Okay. Now, in my API specification, I need to use this kind of example. So, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the fragment file, which is giving me animal equals to dog. Now, let's say tomorrow somebody else is developing any other API specification and they also need to have a similar kind of example. then they again do not need to write the entire code again in their API specification. What they'll need to do, they'll just need to call this API fragment. So this API fragment is not a complete raml specification, yet it is a very, very important part of our specification because this is a component that makes your API reusable. Okay, and it actually helps you to create your specification in a very is in a very easy manner. All right, any questions so far?
Yeah. So when you say calling that, right, do you mean referring that into the main raml, or is it
Yes.
something? Okay.
Yes, exactly. So I'm going to refer it into my main raml, that is my root raml file. So let's, I'll show you the demonstration also, Vijay. Is it okay?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay, fine. Now, the fragments can be of different types. You can create different kinds of fragments, like you can create a trait where you can create your um, sorry for that, so where you can create your client id or a secret or any kind of specific headers which is related to securities or anything else. You can create a trait, you can create a resource type, you can create your own libraries in your fragments, you can create data types in your API fragment that you can use it later in your API specification. You can create your documentation. As I was mentioning before, you can create your own examples, you can create annotation types, and you can create security scheme. So these are the kind of fragments that you can see it on my screen, which is currently provided by MuleSoft. Okay, I can see a question. Do we need to use extends to incorporate fragments? No, we have a separate syntax if I'm able to answer your question correctly. So let's see it in the demo. Is it okay? Yeah. Okay. So for this demonstration, I'm going to quickly show you my Anypoint platform. Please let me know if my screen is visible, if my platform is visible, everyone.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good. So now I'm going to create a fragment. All right. Again, whenever you have to design anything, where will you go? You will go to the design center of your Anypoint platform. So I'll go to the design center. Now in design center, we can create fragments. You can see we have an option to create fragments. Okay, let me quickly log in. Yeah, there you go. So this is your create new button. If you click on this create new button, there is an option to create a new fragment file. You can see it right over here. It's very easy to create. So you will just click on this new fragment. Now let's say I want to give it a name. Okay, so in the interest of time, I have just created a shortcut so that I can save some time. So you can see I have created a fragment with the name client ID enforcement. Okay, and you can see you have different types of fragment types that we were talking about just a few seconds before. You can create any kind of fragment type, you can choose it from the drop down. So let's say I'll go with trait. Okay, I want to create a client ID header in my API specification. So I'll create this fragment. Okay, now you will see that this is actually similar to your API specification. When you create your actual root raml file, this looks similar to that. It will have a version and you can create your identifiers over here. Okay, let me show you how. Again, since this is raml, so we will follow the proper indentations. So let's say I would like to create headers. Okay, sorry. Okay, now I want to create a header with the name client ID and client secret. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create client ID colon enter. Now you can see your Anypoint platform is such a useful tool. It's such a user friendly tool. Over here in the shelf, it will keep on suggesting you what to write next, right? So I have created a header with the name client ID. Now I can define anything. I can define any parameters, I can define any schemas, any types and traits. You can do it right over here. The shelf will keep on updating itself. So let's say I want to create the type. I want this client ID to allow only string type. Okay, I'll give the data type right over here. You can choose it from the drop from the shelf also. Second, let's say I want to define the parameter. What do you want the parameter of this particular header. Should it be required parameter or should it be an optional parameter? I'll go with true. Okay, let's make it a required parameter. Similarly, I'm going to create one more tab with the name client secret. Okay, I hope the spellings are correct. Yes, client secrets it is. Now, same thing. I want to create a type. I want to set the type as string and I want to set the parameter as true, which means I want it to be a required parameter. Okay, done. My fragment is ready. Okay, what I have done in this fragment, I have just created a header with the name client ID and client secret. That's it. Now see, in this fragment you have written just a single line, just a few lines of codes. But these few lines of codes can be reused in multiple API specification, right? In any APIs where you are planning to put a client ID enforcement, in those API specification, you can add this client ID and client secret. Now your API specification does not need to have this particular code in it. Let me show you how. Now I have already created this code. Let me publish it, right? When you will publish it, it will go to your Exchange. You already know Exchange. Exchange is the shared repository, right? It's the centralized repository of your Anypoint platform where you can keep all your assets, which can be visible to or usable to any other resources or users. So over here, let's take care of the versioning. I'll choose the stable one and then I'm gonna publish it to my platform. Okay, cannot create with the provided group ID version state. Why? Let me change the asset version. Let's see what happened. Ideally, it should. Okay, meanwhile, it is publishing. Let me open a duplicate tab here so that we will keep our exchange open. Yes, it is published. I'll click on done. Let me quickly go to my exchange and we should be able to see that my asset is published. Okay, let me refresh it. This is not the one that I have created. Okay, let me try to publish it again. I don't know so what has happened. Okay, let's keep it development for a while. Okay, it's published. Let's go to the exchange. Okay, here it is. Okay, fine. I got it. All right, so you can see my asset is now published. Can you see it? Everybody is able to see this asset? Please confirm. This is
Yes.
the same asset that we have created and we have now published it. Okay. Now what do I want to do? I want to create my root YAML file. I want to create a separate API specification for my application. Again, to create anything, we will go back to Design Center. Okay. Let me click on Create New. And this time we are going to create an API specification. Let's create an API specification and let's say I'll give it a name. Let me give it a name, employee details. Again, to save some time, I have copy pasted it. Now I'll click on create API specification. Okay, it's taking time to load. Perfect. So you can see this is my API specification, right? And wherever you do your actual coding, wherever you write your actual API specification code, that file is called as root file. So this is going to be my root file. So I'm going to create a very basic application APIs. I mean, I'm going to write a very basic YAML code. Okay. Let's say my endpoints are employee. Okay. And I just want to retrieve some data. So whenever you need to retrieve or read any data, you will use get method for that, right? You can see your shelf is also suggesting you the same. So I'm going to click on get. Now When the user is going to click on this get method that you can already see it over here in the documentation, he should get a response. So see, your shelf is also suggesting you that this is the right place to create a response. I'll choose responses. Now, since we are working with REST APIs, right? So they work on HTTP protocol. As you can already see, we have used an HTTP method. So definitely for responses, they will give us a HTTP status code. So since this is a get method, for a success response, we will choose 200. Now, with this 200 status code, I would be getting or I would be expecting a body. Let's say the format or the format of my body should be in the JSON format. Okay. And as of now, I'm just hard coding an example that the name of the employee is uh, Jack. Okay. And let's say his employee ID is um, QWE123. Okay, I have given just some random numbers. So this is what is the structure of my API specification. All right. Now what do I want to do? I want to make it secured. Later on I am going to apply the client ID security over here. As of now, if you will check the documentation, if I'll click on this get method, this is the documentation. As you can see, you have defined a response for 200 with a body of type JSON type, and this is the output that my user should expect. Okay. Now my user will click on try it. He will click on send, and let's see if he's getting the output. Yes, absolutely, he's getting the output as expected, right? Till this point, any questions? Anyone?
Yeah, Ankita, we have a one question in chat window. Can you check that?
Okay, sure, sure. One second. Sorry, I was on a different window. Okay. As client ID enforcement comes as a part of security policy on API instead of trait, can we define those under security scheme? If yes, then what is the difference between security scheme and traits? Okay. So right now, this trait that I'm creating is a simple header. As you can see, I have just defined a header over here, right? In this client ID enforcement, I have simply defined a header. In security schemes, you can define different kind of security policies in as a API fragment, and you can incorporate it in your API specification. Okay. Uh, does anyone want to add on to this particular answer, especially who are from the implementation end and they have an exposure to it?
Okay, I can add something. So
Yes, please.
so so basically, like in security schemes, what happen, like you can define any security headers, or you can define any security schemes like OAuth, client ID enforcement, or any custom kind of security schema, or basic authentication. So basically, like security schema is basically used for defining your security, like what security has been enabled on your API. So those kind of things can be taken care in the security schema. In thread, generally you can define any query parameters or headers, or like error responses or success responses into the threads, reuse across the multiple APIs basically, right? So like when it come to, like when you want, like as per best practice, I will tell you, whenever you want to define anything related to security, just make use of the security schemes. And whenever we want to define some reusable query params, headers, or whatever, anything like any error codes or any error response, you can define into the threads basically. Here Ankita whatever explained, it is just an example, to explain the fragment. So when it comes to client ID or client secret, always define in the security schemes. Okay.
Thank you, Jitendra. So, Manisha, are we able to answer your question? Okay, good. So, let's get back to the designer now. So here, what have we discussed? We have simply created one API specification for employee resource, and my method is get. Now, what do I want to do? I want to create some client ID and client security headers. Now, for that, the first thing that we have to do is we have to import our API fragment from our exchange, right? Because your fragment is in your exchange right now. So what are we going to do? We are going to import that. All right. How are we going to do that? You can see whenever you need to import anything from your exchange, there is a button called as exchange dependencies. Okay. If you go to this exchange dependencies, you can see in the latest version of Anypoint platforms, they have segregated the fragments and rule sets which you can import from your exchange. So we are going to import a fragment. So you will click on the plus button next on the fragment. I mean written next to the fragment. Okay. Here I will search. You can clearly see it right over here also. And if you want to use the search tab, you can search it as well. It will be right on top of your screen. So I have to use this client ID enforcement. I'll go with it. I'll click on add one dependency. The same thing you can do it from your local system also. Okay. Sometimes what happens, your clients share the fragments or the developers share the fragments to you over an email, or you have created it locally on your system. So in that case, what you can do, you can import it directly from your file explorer. So you can go to your file. From here you can create a new file or a folder. I mean, whenever you have to create a fragment, you can directly create it from here. Or if you want to import one, you can create a folder and you can import it from this gear button, which you can see it on my screen at the top right button. I mean, at the top right corner of my screen. So this is the import button. Okay. So right now, what have we done? We have imported this particular um, fragment from our exchange, which you can clearly see it over here, right? If you will open this particular RAML, you should be able to see the same client ID secret headers that I have defined. Okay. Now this particular file has already been added to your application. Now let me tell you how to use this particular code in your root RAML file. Okay. So you will go to your root file again, because this is the file wherein you have to use it. Correct. So first thing that we are going to do is we are going to define this trait. Okay, you can see it. The shelf is also suggesting you that this is the right place to define a trait. Now I'll give this trait a name. Let's say client ID enforcement. Okay. Now what will be the value of this client ID enforcement? Now I think uh, Vijay and I think somebody else had also asked me the question how to use this particular fragment file in your root YAML file. Now the syntax is exclamation include. Okay. Whenever you will use this syntax, it will allow you to include or import any file from your file explorer. Okay. Now what do I want? I want to export or I want to, sorry, I want to import or I want to use this particular YAML specification, which is a fragment in my root YAML file. So next to this YAML, there are three dots. You can click on this copy path and after include, give a space and paste this path. Okay, now you can see your YAML is incorporated, your fragment is incorporated in your API specification. Now the next thing that we have to do is we have to use it. We have to actually incorporate this particular fragment. We have to incorporate the rules written in this particular fragment for my employee resource get method. Okay, so now the formula is you just have to use the syntax is colon enter, and then you have to provide this client ID enforcement that you have already defined on the top. See how user friendly your tool is. It is already suggesting you this particular enforcement to use. You can directly use this particular enforcement and we are done. If you click on this get method now, see the documentation. When the user is going to make a call to this particular API using this get method, now he has to provide this client ID and client secret, which are the mandatory part. Why these are mandatory? Because in your specification, you have defined both these headers as the required parameters. Correct? Now, if I would like to, show you, let me show you the try button. If you click on try it, see, now your headers are ready, right? Generally what we do whenever we have to provide this client ID secrets using our REST clients, we generally create headers, isn't it? You actually go to this headers and you create these headers. But here in Exchange, you can create these headers by default in this particular portal. Okay, and this client ID and client secret is actually not dependent upon whatever code that you have written over here, isn't it? So the same fragment file you can use in any other application or in any other API specification as and when required. So this is the use of a fragment file. Any questions, please? Okay, I can see some in the chat window.
Yeah, there was one question like people asking like when we apply the security schema to API specs, does it mean it will automatically bind to API manager? I mentioned like it will not. It will just
Yes,
validate the metadata or attributes, whatever we have set. But for validating the actual data or actual client ID in the client secret, we need to apply the policy.
actually, yes. Thank you, Jitendra. Okay, anyone, any questions? Any other questions related to the demonstration, related to the concept of fragments? Okay, so Vijay, am I able to answer your question about this include?
Yeah, I got it
Yeah,
completely.
you got it. I think Fanindra, I think you also asked the same question if I'm not wrong. Do we need to use extends to now? I think it is done, right? You are able to got the output. Okay. All right, great. Um, so we don't have any questions. Yes, anyone? Anything else?
No.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, Ankita,
So,
let me add
huh,
few things like for
yes,
this
please.
fragment. So generally like so the like question arise like so what kind of fragment design strategy we can take, right? So what kind of different type of fragment we can define? So generally like what I have seen as per my experience, so we can like define a three types of fragment. One is a domain specific fragment where you can define like enterprise data model which include filtering, enum, data types, and schemas. Then second fragments comes the security schema, a security fragment where you can define all your security schemas for your enterprise and which can be used by your EPs. So generally at the enterprise or what happened like at a enterprise organization what happens, so your security schema will be the consistent across the all the APIs, right? It will be not like that one API is using the OAuth or one API is using the client ID or one API is using the basic authentication, right? So this will be not consistent. So in enterprise level what happened like you may have a two kind of security. One is for internal API, one is at the external API. So you can define those security under the security fragment, and the third fragments come that is the common fragment. Like you can define your resource type, your threads, so like some headers so if you see in organization there are few headers like X correlation ID, X transaction ID, X IP address, X forwarder for those kind of headers, right? Which will be used across the multiple APIs. So those APIs you can define those headers you can define into the threads, and that threads can be defined as a as a fragment basically. Same way you can define your resource type as a fragment. Yeah. So these are the few type of fragments you can design or you can define basically. Yeah. Thanks, sir. Yeah, thank
Thank you so much, Jitendra. Okay, anything else? Anyone? Any other questions? Are we good to proceed to our next segment? Okay, all right. So now in the next segment, we are going to talk about watermarking. All right. So first of all, what is watermarking? Why do we need to talk about this watermarking? So before we understand what watermarking is, we first have to understand the concept of synchronization. Anyone, can you tell me what is synchronization? Anybody?
Synchronizing the data between different applications.
Yes. So basically, if I'll say it in a very layman language, then if there are two systems, okay, and if you are pushing your data in one system, then if we are following the rule of synchronization, automatically the second system should also get updated, right? So now what are we going to do? We are going to do the synchronization with the help of the concept called as watermarking in Mule. Okay, so before we begin, let me tell you this is a very basic introduction about watermarking. So I will be only sticking up to adding of the records. Okay, while you do synchronization, naturally the concept of updation, deletion, everything comes into the picture. Because when you delete something from one system, it should be deleted from the another system. When you are updating something on one system, naturally it should be updated to the another system. But right now, in the interest of time, we are only focusing on the adding of data. Okay, so let's talk about the process of synchronization. Whenever you do synchronization between any two systems, the general formula is that in the first synchronization, when you are going to do the first synchronization, your entire data should be moved from one system to another system, right? But whenever you do the later synchronization, you are not going to move the entire data again from one system to another. Rather, you are only going to move the newly added data which you have added to one system from one to another, right? So let me open my Jamboard quickly so that it will be easier for me to show it to you. Okay, sorry about these. Okay, so there we go. So you can see if I talk about two systems here, okay, my system A and system B. Please pardon my handwriting. So now in system A, let's say I have 10 records, okay. So when you are going to do your first time synchronization, what is the rule? You are going to move your entire 10 records from system A to system B. So your entire 1 to 10 records are going to be added. But let's say in system A, you have added two more records. Okay, let's say you have added 11th and 12th record. So in the later synchronization, when you are going to do the second time synchronization, it is not going to move the entire 12 records again from system A to system B, right? What it is going to do, it is just going to move the new records that you have added to your system A to system B. So only 11 and 12, these two records should be added to your second system. This is the concept of, this is the process of synchronization. Okay. Any questions still here? All right. Now, how are we going to achieve this method? How are we going to achieve this particular process in Mule? Here comes the concept of watermarking. Okay. Now, what do we do basically whenever we do the synchronization? We have to choose a timestamp. Okay. For example, if I show it to you once more, again, this is my system A and system B. Now let's imagine this is my 10 records in system A, and in the first time synchronization, both the systems are updated, okay, because I have to move the entire data from one system to another system. So my first time synchronization is done. Now what I'm going to do, I have to find out a timestamp. Now, this timestamp can be anything, okay? It depends upon the system where you are doing the synchronization. For example, if you are doing the synchronization between two files or from in a file system, then your timestamp would be the created timestamp of the file. Or if the file is getting modified, then it will be modified timestamp of the file. Similarly, if there is a database, right? So in database, what can be the timestamp? It can be any value which is incremental in nature. For example, there is this database where you have a column called a serial number, you have name, you have age, you have gender, and so on. Now name, age, gender, these all will be the input from the user. But the moment a user is going to input this value, automatically the serial number will be changed. Now, if there are 10 records in my database, then automatically when I am going to enter my record, what will happen? My record will be automatically the 11th record. Correct? So this can be chosen as my timestamp value. All right. So for example, let's imagine that right now this particular 1 to 10 that I'm showing you on my screen is the timestamp. I have chosen this as my timestamp. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to store the highest timestamp of my system A and B to this T. Okay. This is my timestamp value that I have stored. Now, tomorrow, if somebody adds two more records in my system A, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to check the highest timestamp of my system A. What is the highest timestamp right now? It is 12. And what is the stored timestamp that you had stored previously, which was both in my system A and B? It was 10. So is 12 greater than 10? Yes, it is. So we need to move only two new records from my system A to system B. So what will happen? Only these two new records will be moved from system A to system B, and this timestamp value will be changed from 10 to 12. Now later on, again, if let's say there are three more records which have been added, now how are we going to apply this logic? Again, in my system A, what is the highest timestamp? It is 15. Okay, now I am going to compare. Is 15 greater than 12? Yes, it is. How many records needs to be pushed? Three new records to be pushed. So only three new records are going to be pushed. Okay, let's say after a while no new records have been added, then what will, how are we going to check? Again, the same thing. The highest timestamp of A is 15. Is 15 greater than 15? No, it is equal to 15. It means that I have zero payloads, I have zero records that needs to be moved from my system A to system B. Okay, this is the concept of synchronization. And in the world of Mule, this timestamp that you are going to use to store your values is called as watermarking. Okay, why watermarking? A very basic, ideology. Uh, in rural areas basically, or even today, people, when people have to locate the tides, how do they do it? They create watermark somewhere, right? Maybe there is a wall, and if let's say there is a tide, so whenever there is a tide, they will make a mark on their wall. Okay, let's say this is my mark A. Now tomorrow, if the tide will increase or it will decrease, they do the comparison with the help of this mark. If the tide goes higher, it means that my tides are increasing. This they actually deduce with the help of this watermarking. And if the tide is getting lower, you can compare it with the help of the marks. From here, the concept of watermark has came into the picture, and that is the reason this is known as watermark. Because you are also doing the same thing, right? You are choosing a standard, and based on that standard, you are doing your comparison. Okay, does this make sense? Any questions till now? Any confusions about the process of synchronization?
Ankita, concept wise, it is like fine, but can you show me in
Absolutely.
MuleSoft how we do it?
Yes, yes, absolutely. We are going to do that. Okay. So the concepts are clear to everyone, correct? Okay, perfect. All right. Now, there are two kinds of watermarking in Mule. One is automatic watermarking, where all the things, where, we were talking about this, understanding what is the watermark value, then storing it somewhere, then retrieving it, then comparing it. All the things are going to be done automatically by your Mule. And then there is manual watermarking. In manual watermarking, you will perform the entire uh, process all by your own with the help of a tool called as object store, with the help of a module called as object store. So one by one, we will have a look on both of these. First, we will talk about automatic watermarking, then we will talk about manual watermarking. Automatic watermarking is available in few of the listeners, like you have it on your updated file operation, which is one of the file connectors, which is one of the operations of your file connectors. And you can also find it on your on table row operation, which is one of the operations of your database connector. Okay, so in the demonstration, first we will see how this automatic watermarking works. All right, can we go ahead with the demonstration then?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, great. Let me just remove my board. Yeah. Now let's create a new project quickly. I'm going to create a new project. Okay. Let's name this project as check watermark in Mu. Okay. I'll click on finish. All right. My canvas is open. So here, first of all, let's understand a scenario. Okay, let's take a use case. Let's imagine I have a database. Okay, and I want to do the synchronization between my database, and I want to write the entire content in a file. Okay, the concept is clear. I have two systems. One system is my database, second system is my file, and I want to move the entire data of my database to my file. Okay, this is the basic use case that I'm going to take. So naturally, when you are going to deal with database, you need to add database module, which is not present by default. I'll add it quickly. You can clearly see it on my screen. I have added this database module. In database, you can see there is an operation called as on table row operation. Okay. This on table row operation is an event source activity. Event source activity is an activity, or is an operation that actually helps you to initiate your flow. Okay, there are many operations like on table row and on your updated file operation, which you can use to incorporate your automatic watermarking. Okay, just for the sake of this particular training, I have chosen this particular example. But just like this, you can see if I'll add a file module, in file module also you have one on your updated file operation with the which is again an event source activity, and you can perform automatic watermarking over here. Just like that, you have one Salesforce module. In Salesforce module also you have certain event sources like on new record, where you can perform your automatic watermarking. Okay, there are many, but I have taken Just these as an examples. So this is my on table row operation. So let's quickly configure it. Okay. So generally, whenever you have to do the connector configuration, we do it in a separate file, right? For global elements. I believe you already know about it, which is global.xml, but let's keep it simple as of now. I'm gonna just hard code these values because my motive is to show you watermarking right now. So I'm quickly going to configure my database. I'll just quickly activate my jars. Okay, and let me quickly add my configurations. Okay, my port, password, and my database name. Yes, test connection. Let's see if the connection is successful. Yes, it is. Okay, I'll click on OK. So my database is now configured. Now let me add the table name, which is what happened? Yes, which is accounts. So I've added it. Now here you can see there are two columns. Okay, one is watermark column and second is ID column. So let's first understand what is the difference between these two. Okay, so let me again quickly show you the concepts. So the watermarking is generally used to avoid the duplicate processing of the data, just now as we have seen, right? This is A and this is B. Let's say I have 5 records in A. So what will happen in the first time synchronization? The entire 5 records will be moved to B. Now what I'm going to do, I'll select the highest timestamp. Now just first understand, how are we going to choose the highest timestamp? The timestamp should be a value that should be incremental in nature, right? For example, if there is a database, so if any new record is getting added, then the serial number column is the column which is automatically getting incremented, right? Unless and until the data is not getting incremented, you will not be able to do the comparison, right? So be it a file operation also. So in file operation also, let's say first time the file is created at 11:56 a.m. Okay, next time when the file is created, let's say it is created at 12:05 p.m. So see, your time is actually incrementing. So you have to understand this point, that the watermark column will be the column which is incremental in nature. Okay, it has to be incremented. Okay, and it will never have the duplicate value. Otherwise, it will be confusing. Correct? Now, first time synchronization is clear. So second time synchronization, let's say I have added 3 more records. So 6, 7, 8. What will happen in the second time synchronization? You will store the value of watermark as 5. You will do the comparison with the highest timestamp 8, which is greater than 5. We have 3 new records that needs to be moved from A to B. So you can see you have 3 new records pushed from A to B, and now your watermark value will be changed to 8. So why are we using this watermarking? To avoid the duplicate processing of the data, right? We do not want these 5 records to be pushed again from A to B. That is the reason you created a timestamp, and after that particular timestamp, whatever the new data is, you are going to push it to another system. This is the job of watermarking. Now let's talk about idempotency or ID column. Now let's imagine this is the database which is getting the user input. Okay, in this database there are a few columns. Let's say one is your serial number, one is name, one is age, and let's say one is PAN number. Okay, now imagine there are already 10 records in this particular database. Just imagine I want to enter my record to this database. The moment I'll enter my record to this database, automatically it will be the 11th record, right? My name, my age, and let's say my PAN number. Okay, this will be my entry. But for some reason, let's imagine that I got an error in my system, that your network is unstable or there is a network glitch, something like that. So as a user, I'll get an idea that, hey, my data is not entered. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add my data one more time. And automatically, when I'm going to re-enter my serial number will automatically be 12th, although the name, age, and PAN number will be the same, isn't it? Now, in this particular database, row number 11 and 12 both are similar, both are duplicate of each other. Correct? Again, let's imagine, again, I got the same network glitch. Again, I got the error. It happens, right? With all of us. We have added our records several times into the same database. Let's say I do the same thing. I entered my data again. And what has happened? Automatically, the 13th record is also registered by my data. But in database, there are three records which are duplicate of each other. Correct? Now, as the owner, as a developer, or as the as an integration part, as you're working with this particular system, what you are going to do when you are going to move these data from your system A to system B, naturally you would not like to waste your resource. Correct? So why to re-enter the duplicate data again from system A to system B? Now here comes the concept of idempotency. Now idempotency column. Okay, Kalyani. So what I'm trying to say is that this is the database, okay? In the database, there are a few records which are already entered, and I want to enter my data into this database. So when I will enter my database data into this database, so let's say in that database there were 10 records. So automatically my record will be the 11th one, correct? Till this point, are you good? Okay. Let's imagine that as a user, I'm a user, right? I have nothing to do with this database or anything. I'm just entering my data somewhere. So as a user, I got an error in my system that there is a network issue. Then I will get an impression that, hey, my data is not entered. So what am I going to do? I will re-enter my data to the same system, right? Happens. It might have happened with you also. You might be filling a form somewhere, and if the data is not entered properly, or if you got an error, you will re-enter your data. So when I will re-enter the data, then what will happen? Automatically my data will be entered again, but this time the serial number will be 12. It will automatically be incremented, isn't it? Yeah, Kalyani, is it clear? Okay. And same thing can happen, or same thing can be repeated third time also, fourth time also. Until and unless, as a user, if I'm not getting that, okay, your data has been updated, I might re-enter my data again and again in the database. And this, because of this, what will happen? My database can have redundant data, duplicate data. Correct? Now, currently in my database A, I have three records, 11, 12, and 13, which are duplicate of each other, which are redundant. Now, when I'm going to do the synchronization, when I'm going to push these data from system A to system B, I would not like to process my duplicate data to the system. If there are three data which is redundant, I would like to have only one data which will be entered into my system B, isn't it? Yeah. So in this scenario, the ID column, the idempotency formula comes into the picture. Now in idempotency, I have to decide a particular column that will contain unique value for each record. Okay. So here in this particular database, you can see anyone can have same name, anyone can share the same age, but PAN number is something which will be unique for each user, right? Every single user will have their own PAN number, correct? So PAN number is also a unique value. Okay, just like your watermark column, just like your serial number. But the only difference is it is not necessary that the PAN number will be incremented in incremental in nature. Any user can have any PAN number when they are registering their data, and it does not have to be incremental in nature. But the serial number will always be incremental in nature. The watermark column will always have to be incrementing. Correct? Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to set my PAN number column as my idempotency column. Now in this scenario, what will happen? Again, let's talk about the synchronization. Okay. Let's say in A and B, both the systems, I have 10 records. Now, when the 11th record will be added, 11, 12, and 13 records are added now, right? As per this particular scenario. But all these three records are duplicate of each other. Now, what will happen when the 11th record will be pushed from system A to system B? Now, not only this watermark value will be compared, that okay, 11 is higher than 10, then 11 has to be moved, but also the PAN number will be compared with all the 10 records that has already been entered. So since my PAN number is not matching any of the 10 records which are already entered in my system B, so the 11th record will be pushed to my system B. But when it will come to record number 12, now From the timestamp perspective, naturally 12 is greater than the watermark value that you have stored right now, which is 11. But what will happen? In case of PAN number, the PAN number value of my record number 12 is matching with the PAN number of 11. Then what will happen? 12th record will not be entered into my second system. 13th record will similarly will not be added to my second system. So the watermark value now which is stored is 11. Correct? Now next time, let's say the 14th record is added and the 14th record is completely unique. It is a new record. Okay? It has a different PAN number. Then 14th will be compared with this 11. Since 14 is greater than 11, yes, it is greater. What about the PAN numbers? We will check for the PAN number. 12th, it is not matching. 13th, it is not matching. 14, is it matching? No, it is not matching with any of the PAN numbers till these 11th record. So what will happen? Automatically after 11th, 14th record will be entered and the watermark value will be changed to 14. Okay.
Ankit,
Huh. Sorry.
yeah, yeah, I have a query here. So with respect to this item potency, right?
Mhm,
Um, so when you mark the item potency for that, let's say the column called the pan, right?
mhm,
So as you say, when it is going to see the 13th record, and as you see the duplication is already there in 12th and 11th record,
mhm.
does it like go and check all the records whether the pan is repetitive, that needs to be ignored?
Yes, yes. It will be checking all the records from record number 1 to record number 11.
Okay, so ideally, I believe the item potency ideally will be covered in the a database level itself when
Mhm,
they apply the constraint, right? So for example, if
mhm,
if they applies as a pan as a primary key, so
mhm,
definitely it will not be repeatable. So if such case, if the item potency by default handled at the database level itself, so
mhm.
then we need not to apply the item potency at mule level, right?
See, it actually depends. This is one of the use case that I have given you, which is related to the duplicate data. There are many reasons where idempotency columns are justified or they are created, because sometimes what happens during processing, if any of the records are missed, okay, during faster processing or during the lag, whenever during the performance tuning, if there is a lag, then at that time we don't want any of the records to be missed. Then in that case also you can give id column, that each and every pan number column should be matched and it should be sent to your second system. So ideally, idempotency, what you said is also correct, can happen at the database level also. But when your application is actually open to a user, where you are taking user inputs, then what happens? Many a times in your database, you do not have that particular filter, right? If a user is entering 5 times, then the records can be registered 5 times also. And for preventing that particular thing, I don't want my duplicate data to be processed in any ways, or I don't want any of the data to be missed. I will be using my idempotency column in that case.
I agree. But having this item potency from the mule level doesn't create the latency in the processing. Consider you have a thousands of records at your
Mhm.
database.
Okay, I think this question can be better answered by the people who are actually working on these kind of projects. So, anyone who has an experience, please feel free to pitch in.
Yeah, Vijay, you are right. It is all not always we need to create the item potency. So this kind of things can be taken care by other ways also. Like as you mentioned, adding the constraint at the database level. Apart from that, even you can make use of some other integration patterns, so where reliability pattern. If some network while synchronizing, you're not able to send the message to end system. In that case, you can store the message somewhere, to ensure that it can be a guaranteed delivery, so if you are processing millions of record, it will not make sense to check for item potency. It will add additional latency for each and every record, that is get synchronized with your end or destination systems basically, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah. So that's right. That's what I'm expecting. That's right.
yeah,
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jitendra. Okay. I hope Vijay, your question is answered, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Perfect. So, this is the use of our watermark column and id column. So sometimes if I mean, you might get confused between which column to be chosen as an id column or which column to be to be chosen as a watermark column, because both the columns will have unique values, right? Both the values has to be unique in nature, they cannot be duplicate, they cannot be redundant. Then how are we going to differentiate between two of them? You have to understand that whichever column is having incremental value, only with the help of that value you should be able to do your comparison. Okay, so you have to understand that particular difference. All right, so let's quickly move on to this particular use case. So I have this database with me. Let me just open my database. So let's imagine I have this particular database. Let me show it to you on my screen. Okay, let's say this is a database that I'm dealing with. Okay, in this particular database you can see there are 306 records. Okay, and there are so many columns over here: account ID, name, street, city, state, postal code, country. Now you can clearly understand by seeing this particular image that which particular column can be my watermark column. Now every time a new account is going to be added, there is this one column that will automatically get incremented, and that is going to be your account ID column, isn't it? So what will happen? This account ID column will be incremented. So naturally this account ID is going to be my watermark column. Okay. So let me quickly show it to you right over here. I'm going to give account ID column as my watermark column. All right. Now, okay. All right. Why it is giving this expression error?
Expecting Chrome expression.
Sorry.
It's expecting Chrome expressions. You have to put it all. You can use
Yeah,
any
you can
scheduling
change the schedule strategy. Like you can change to like a
Oh, I'm sorry.
fixed
Sorry,
frequency.
sorry. Yeah, my bad. My bad. I'm so sorry. This is when we by mistake, click on the mouse wheel, this happens. Sorry about that. Okay, so now what are we going to do? We can set a scheduling strategy. So here I'm going to set the scheduling strategy as 10 seconds. Okay, so what will happen in every 10 seconds, this particular operation will make a poll to my database. It will check my database if any new records has been added. Now, what do I want to do? I want to pull my data from the database and I want to write it in a file. So to write it in a file, you will use a write file operation that you can see I've already added the file module. So I'm going to pull out the write file operation. Okay. In write file operation, let me quickly add a path. So let's say I'll add a path over here. Okay, I'll simply give my C drive and workspace location. That will be easier. So I'm going to give C workspace, and there is this output folder that I'm going to give. I've already created this output folder. As you can see, it already exists. So I'm going to give this path. Now after this, I'm gonna give the name of the file. So I'll give the name of the file as, let's say, automatic water marking dot csv. Okay, this is going to be my csv file. Here I'm going to change the write mode to append. Why append? Because this will give you an idea whether the new records are getting added or not. Okay, or are we processing the entire records? So this will give you an idea about it. Okay. So I think my write file is also configured. Now my database will be in Java format. I want to write it in a CSV format. So naturally I'll have to transform my output. So I'm going to use this transform message component. And here, let's say I want to convert my output into CSV format. I don't want headers as of now. So I'll give header equals to false. And here, um, what do I want to push? I want to push my payload. Okay, so whatever payload that this on table row operation is going to pull out from my database, I want to convert it into CSV format and I would like to write it in a file operation. Okay, let's add a logger also. Okay, and in the logger, I'll enable the expression mode to write my payload in my logs. Okay, now what will happen? When I'm going to deploy this application, this on table row operation will make a call to my database. It will check for the data, whatever data are there. So right now you can see it on my screen. I had 306 records, right? So all the 306 records should be pulled one by one, should be transformed into CSV format, and should be written in this particular file and logged by the logger. Okay, so we are going to deploy and run the application. But before we are going to do that, let me make a small change in my workspace. This change that I'm making right now is just for the training purpose, guys. Okay, please do not do these kind of changes in your production environment or on your client server. Just to show you how it is going to work, I am going to change some settings. I'll make this clear application data option as prompt. Okay, by default it is set to never, but I have done it to prompt for the testing purpose, so that I should be able to show you how it works. So I'm going to click on run project. So let's see, let's wait for the project to get deployed, and post that you should be able to see how all the records are going to be pulled from my database and is going to be written in this particular file. And just be mindful that this is the first time synchronization that you are doing, isn't it? This is the first time synchronization that we are doing right now. So let's quickly have a look. Okay, there are 306 records. So you should be able to see how all the records are going to be populated. So let's wait. Okay, now the application is deployed. Yeah, see, all the 300 records are getting added. Can you see it on my screen? Yeah, all the 300 records are now added in my project, right? I think somebody else has added a new record over here. So instead of 306 records, there are 307 records. If I'm not wrong, let me show you. Okay, so somebody else has also added their record. This is a shared database basically. So somebody else has added this particular record. So you can see 307 records, and this 308 record is my record, which by default got added. So you can see there are in total 308 records which are moved from my database to file operation. Okay, you can also see in my folder the file should be created. Okay, this is my file which is created, and this file should have all the 306, 308 records to be precise are added in my file. Okay, now let me show you one more thing. Okay, we are talking about watermarking. This was the first time synchronization that had happened, right? Let's talk about the second time synchronization. I'm going to stop this project. Okay, and I will run this project again. Okay, why didn't ask me to prompt? Oh my god, I made it never. Let me stop this application. Let me set it to prompt. Okay, apply and close. Now I'm gonna run the project. See, whenever I made these change, it will prompt me, right? That do you want to clear the application data or not? Since I've done it, again, so let me first clear the application data, show it to you once again, and then we are going to see the second time synchronization again. Okay, so let me delete this file, otherwise it will be confusing. I'm going to delete this. Project has started, initialized. Yes.
uh, so with respect to this watermarking value, right? So
Uh-huh.
it's by default, so let's say there are three, not eight records is available. So one is have been all been loaded as a first synchronization.
Mhm.
So the watermarking value should be stored in the mule default object store, right?
No, no, right now we are not using any object store. This is the default one, right? This is, I'm not using any object store. This is automatic.
I don't know, I'm
So when
talking
it
about
is
mule object
automatic,
store, default object store.
No, it will be stored in my file system. That's the reason I have set this configuration, right? That it will ask whether to delete my data from the application system or not. Okay, so since we are using the local Mule runtime, so my data is getting stored in my local file system. If you're going to use Cloud Hub, or if going to use any shared Mule runtimes, then it will be stored in your distributed memories. Okay.
Okay, so even after my application, restarted or redeployed, still the watermark value remains the same, right? So it won't get impacted.
Absolutely. That's what I wanted to show you right now. So this is the first time synchronization. All the 308 records have been added. So this time I'm going to stop the project and I'm going to run the project once again. Okay. This time when I'm going to run the project, see, I've not added any new records as of now, right? This is a shared database. So hopefully somebody else should not add it. So this time, see, do you want to clear the application data? I'll say no, I don't want to clear the application data. Then what will happen? The value of my watermark, which you have mentioned or which you have configured from here, that this account ID value should be the this is the watermark column. So whatever is the highest value of this particular watermark column, that should be stored as the value of my watermark. So that's the reason when we are going to do the deployment for the next time without deleting my data, see what will happen. No new records are going to be added afterwards. Why? Because I have not added any new records. Otherwise, what would have happened? Again, the entire 308 records would have been processed. I'll show you the difference. Just give me one moment. Just taking time. I'll show you the difference right away. You understood the first time synchronization, right? Okay. See, I did not delete my watermark value. What has happened? My application is deployed, but now no new records are getting written in my file again. Okay. Let me add one new record now. Okay. Let's see. I'm gonna add one new record. Let's say add account. Let me give the account name uh, ASDF, street name as test, postal code as 1234, city as test, state as test, and country as test. Okay, I have added a new account. I'll click on save. Now this is the second time synchronization. What is the rule? That whenever the second time synchronization will happen, or whenever the later synchronizations will happen, only the later records, only the newly added records are going to be pushed from one system to another. So you can see after 308, only the 309th record is now getting pushed. This is the beauty of automatic watermarking. See, somebody else has also added a new record, which is 310th. So automatically the new record is getting pushed to my system. This is the concept of watermarking, and this is how you can handle it automatically, where you did not have to do anything, right? We have not done anything apart from configuring our table name and watermark column. Other than that, we have not done anything. Rest everything is going to be taken care of by Mu. Any questions related to automatic watermarking?
There is a one
Okay.
question in chat, Vindu.
Okay. How ID column would behave after object store TTL gets expired? Okay. Anyone wants to answer this one?
I think it should again become a first time synchronization.
Hmm. Yes. Anyone else? Any more inputs?
Hi Ankita, this is Sai Prakash this side.
Hi.
So I have query. So in this case, yeah, it looks good. But in case of, so let's say we have 300 records and at a time, 100 users has created 100 records in at a time. Okay. So
Hmm.
in that time, so will it be adding the records to the file based system sequentially, or so in that case it will be more number of calls, right? 100 calls to the 100
Hmm.
files, right?
Hmm.
So what is the best way, do you think that is the best practice to use in this scenario?
Okay. In this scenario, see, ideally, it is not necessary that it has to be in a sequence. Okay. So you can write your code over here and you can arrange the payload to be in a sequential manner if you want the output to be in a sequence. Okay. Otherwise, the same thing can be handled using your manual watermarking. So in manual watermarking, all these queries which are running internally, that you are going to write. So you can write it in your own customized manner. Got it? So whenever you are dealing with the records where you need to do some custom evaluation, where you need to make some custom changes, we generally prefer to do it using our manual watermarking. In automatic watermarking, of course, you can do the synchronization. You can synchronize the data in your write file operation where you can input the data in the particular sequential manner. If I'm able to answer your question, if I'm able to understand your question correctly, right, Prakash?
Yes, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Coming back to Kunal's question, I think this question was missed. So anyone else wants to answer this question? Jitendra, would you like to pitch in, please?
Yeah, see, basically what happens, so generally in object store, like, no, that see that particular object store will keep on updating, right? So like that 30 day, like, it's generally where he's saying like the 30 days expiry, when nothing is happening on that particular or like object store or where the data will be stored, right? For next 30 days, then it will be deleted. Otherwise, it will be not deleted, right? If that particular object store or whatever that is getting updated, then in that case it will not delete it. In case if nothing is happening on that particular object store for 30 days, then it will get updated, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so technically, when the object store gets updated, so again, the TTL time will be extended from the date of update, for
Correct.
next 30 days. So the question is, what if for 30 days, if the object store, remains untouched, and it got expired, right? So in that case, the object store is missing. So ideally, it becomes again the first time synchronization, right? From like as an initial load.
Yeah, that was the limitation of object store, right? So that we need to, like, we need to like, we cannot go beyond 30 days. That is the maximum like length you can define for your object store.
Or in that case, we might go for an external database or something to store the value, so it remains constant, and we don't go for the initial load again.
Yeah, that is also fine, like, so if we also, like, that can be done, but again, like, every time we reading the watermark from database for each and every request, right? It doesn't make that sense. And like, like, apart from that, you have to ensure that, so basically whenever you are like, let's consider if you are getting the request from parallel, like, from pair, like if you are getting the request from multiple things, like in parallel basically, right? In that case, there might be chances like your watermark mark may get updated with wrong data also, right? And like, you can do that, like, Vijay, adding to the data, you can add watermark in the database also, that's fine, but every time you have to read it from there, right? So for each and every upload, like, you have to read it from there, then you have to update there, so that's a problem, like, basically, see,
No,
I will
and
tell you a simple example on table row. What does this mean? Like, as soon as anything get updated in your, right? So it will pick the data and it will process it, right? So the situation will never come, like, so basically here, the situation will never come where, like, where your data, like, where your object store is not getting updated for 30 days, like, this will never happen, correct?
agree. But specifically, when the deployment models get changed, say when we are going out of the cloud hub or the actual cloud deployment, when we are running for the runtime fabric. So sometimes the object store are specific to that container.
See, in runtime fabric is like, runtime fabric, whenever your application will restart, right, your data will be lost, all objects or data will be lost in runtime fabric.
Yes,
For that, you have to use the persistent gateway, or like object persistent gateway, like, so with the persistent gateway you can persist your object store data. Even the application restart, your data will be persisted, your watermark will be
understood.
the
Yes,
persisted.
Yes,
got
so
it, Sridhara.
adding to the Jitendra's explanation, so first of all, we have to understand the object store capability. So we have to be clear with that, the object store capability. You can't make object store as a permanent storage. It's also recommended from MuleSoft. If you are looking into it, then you have to tweak your application. What you can do is you can set up a scheduler for 20th ninth day and you can update it if it is the case. Okay, just a development point of view, you have to think on, right? First of all, as Jitendra said, we can't expect our application running in production. It is no transaction, within a month. It's just a waste, right? So it's not a, the ideal scenario even. If let's suppose it is ideal there, we can tweak our application in a such a way. On 29th day, our application automatically get triggered, not the actual one, just to update the object store, and that we get the old one that we can extend 30 more days. Okay,
Yep,
so
and
yep.
and
I did that stuff in one of my projects. So I usually put, if I want to update by object store manually or by putting scheduler, so we handle that here as well.
And Vijay, like this situation will happen on cloud update. Like this situation will not happen on the Mule runtime on customer hosted Mule runtime, where I don't think we have any limitations, right? So basically, if you are using the object store, which is in the cloud hub, basically a version 2 object store or version 1, right? So that limitation applies to that. Like if you are deploying a scheduler on your on premise, I don't think there's any limitation on that.
Right, rightly said. That, on on-prem we are using disk space, right? So there is no limitation there, so we can
Yeah, it depends like what kind of you are using object store. If you are using
exactly.
a persistent object store, transient object store, like it depends like what kind of, if you are using the persistent object store, so it will be using the JDBC connection. It will store that in the database. Like as Vijay mentioned, like you can use that approach also, right?
Correct,
So
correct, correct.
so instead of you writing, you create your own database and you store there. Then you can use the persistent object store with like a JDBC for at least for on premise. I'm aware like Cloud Hub doesn't support a clustering basically directly. It doesn't support Hazelcast clustering. And for RTF, as I mentioned, you can use the persistent gateway, which is recently introduced, and that only support a Postgres SQL database.
Yeah, got it. I have one more question related to this automatic watermark. Okay, so when you're running in runtime fabric, so I think it uses a default file system to store the watermarking values, right? So when the pod is getting restarted, so is it a case that that default whatever the automatic watermark being stored is also being managed?
Yes, so for that you have to I think you have to use the clustering, like you have to,
Clustering.
like so basically you have to create a multiple instance of your application. In case if one application, one pod goes down, but still you have a data available with a, like once that particular pod is come up, right? So you have a concept of primary secondary, like you can make use of that basically.
Uh,
You have to cluster multiple application. Yeah, now you are right basically, like in art the data also, if you are deploying and it is schedule based application, I think you will, like as soon as see, if you like as soon as you're like, what will happen, I will tell you, Vijay. If it's getting redeployed, then there is a no issue, right? If you are deleting and deploy the application, then you will lose the data.
what if the pods crashes and comes back due to some resource allocation? In that as well, we lose the data, or it still persists, specific to the
uh
automatic watermarking.
okay. uh right now, like I don't have 100% answer. So but what I'm thinking, like it will lose the data actually if you are not using the persistent gateway.
If it is restart, you will lose.
No, restart will not
Understood.
lose the data, I think.
In what we are saying.
So if your pod is like reinitiating, or like if prod is trying to create another node, like we have some concept called fleet management, Vijay, right? Where like if some pod is not performing well or it's become unhealthy, right, it will try to initiate a pod in other node, in other worker node. In that case, if you are not using the persistent git, I think data should loss. I'm not 100% sure, Vijay, but
Okay.
let me like, this is a good thing. Like I will give back to, let me do one small POC. I have a RTF instance. I will come back to you on, like I will ping you on like LinkedIn. Let me check that.
Yeah, yeah, sure, sure. Thank you, Jitendra.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you everyone for this insightful conversation. From an implementation perspective, also we get to learn a lot of things during these discussions. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's move on to the automatic. Automatic is done. Now we will check the manual watermarking. Okay, so I believe the basic concepts are clear related to automatic watermarking. Yeah, anyone? Mona, are we good with this particular part?
Yes, Ankita.
Huh? Okay, very good. Now let's move on to the manual watermarking. So just now we have seen the process, right? So in this process, basically first you have to determine your watermark value. You need to store it somewhere. Then you have to identify the highest timestamp. You have to do the comparison while retrieving the data, correct? So all these things were happening automatically in case of automatic watermarking. You did not do anything, correct? But in manual watermarking, you can do, you can store the data, you can retrieve the data, and you can compare the data. You can follow the concept of synchronization and you can implement these logic manually. Okay, now let's see how. Definitely for doing this process, we need some aid. We need a module called as object store module. Okay, first let me show you one more thing. Where is my slide? Yes. So first let's talk about object store. So object store component basically store values in simple key value pairs. You can use this object store component in any point in any point studio, and you can store your values in a key value pair. Okay. Object store can be used for multiple purposes. It's not restricted that it has to be used only for watermarking. You can use object store to store your access tokens, your user information, any kind of data can be stored using your object store. The best point about object store is that the data is persistent. So even if the application gets undeployed, the system stops, the server breaks down, the network issues happen, whenever you are going to resume, you will resume from the point from where you have stopped. Okay, so data will always be persistent. And again, one more USP is that this object store is available without any setup or configuration. We can use it directly in our Anypoint Studio. Let me show you how. Okay. So first thing that we have to do is we are going to add that object store module. You can go to your add modules and you can see your object store module is ready to use. You just have to add it to your project. Okay, now we are good to continue with this object store, and you do not need to do any kind of extra setup or any kind of configuration settings to use these object store. There are several operations that you can see it over here. You have store operations, retrieve operations, remove. There are so many operations. But since this training is very basic, we are going to stick with the basic concepts. Okay. Now let's create a new flow. And for that new flow, I'll pull out a scheduler component. Okay. I'll take a scheduler component and I'll rename this flow as check watermarking manual. Okay. All right. Now scheduler will is just like a polar activity. It will schedule the way you want to schedule it, schedule your flow. It will keep on triggering your flow in that particular interval. So I'll keep it fixed frequency and I'm going to change the frequency to 10 seconds. Okay, so that in every 10 seconds this scheduler should trigger my flow. Now use case is same. Okay, use case is still the same. We are going to pull out the data from our database and we are going to write it in a file. Simple. Now this time we are going to use a select operation, because whenever you need to read a data, retrieve a data, you will use the select operation from the database. So let's pull out the select operation. Let me quickly do the configuration. I'm going to connect it with the same database. I'll write a query over here. Select star from, my table name is accounts, where I'm going to add a condition over here. The reason being, as you can see, my database is having almost 309 records, right? So if we are going to do it manually, it will be difficult for me to debug the application and show it to you right over here in the presentation. So let me keep it very simple. Let me stick to a certain postal code. Okay, I just want to retrieve the data for this postal code. Let's say 80202. This is a postal code, and you can see there are two records, 305 and 304, which are having these two postal codes. Okay, let's deal with that. Okay, so what was the postal code? 80202. So I'm gonna write where my postal is equal to colon postal. What is the value of postal? Let's put it in the input parameter. Postal is equal to 80202, and my spelling is wrong, and I don't know why I've given the yeah, curly braces, postal colon 80202. Okay. Now, let me do a quick check so that it should not fail. Yeah, table name is correct. It is accounts. Yes. So what am I going to do? This is my scheduler. This select operation should pull out the data from the database for a specific postal code, okay, which is 80202. Now again, the same thing, I would like to write it in a file. Before writing it in a file, I would like to transform it into CSV format because my file is in the CSV format. So simple code CSV. I don't want header, so I'll put header equals to false. And here I'm gonna write payload, correct? Because I want to move my payload from the database to my write file operation. Where is my file? Write operation. Let's do the configuration again. Let's choose the same path. Okay, I'll just change the name of the file. So let me go to the path. I'll change the name of this file to, let's say, manual. Okay, and of course I'm going to change the mode of this particular file as write mode. Now see, this is a very basic application, right, that you have created. This is a scheduler. Select operation is going to pull out the data from your database and it is going to transform it into CSV and write it into the file. Fine. No watermarking, no way of handling the synchronization, right? This time what will happen? All the data is going to be written again and again in the write file operation. But now we want to handle the synchronization manually with the help of manual watermarking. And for this, I'm going to use my object store. Now, what is the first job of object store? What is the first job in watermarking? The first job is in the watermarking is to identify your highest timestamp that you are going to store in a watermark. Correct? So as per my application, my database, I already know that my account ID is going to be my watermark column. And out of all the data that I'm going to push from my first system to another system, what will be the watermark value? The highest value of the timestamp that should be stored as the watermark value, right? So currently, if it is 304 and 305 for this specific postal code, if tomorrow a new record is going to be added, which will be 310 for the same specific postal code, then what will happen? From 305, automatically the watermark value should be changed to 310, sorry, 310. Correct? Same logic we are going to apply. So first of all, to store the value of watermark, you will use the store operation of object store. And I'm going to put it just after my select operation. Now, when you use the object store, you need to provide the key value pair. Okay, so let's say I'm going to provide a key over here, which is test. All right. And what should be the value? Now, what value it should store? It should store the maximum value of my account ID, right? So I'm going to use max function over here, which is an inbuilt function. So max function. Now, which value of the payload should be stored? The highest value of account ID. Can I say that? Everybody is having clear concepts still here? Any questions, any confusions till this point? Okay.
Only query. So I believe you use the object store only for watermark, not for the item potency.
Yeah, right now we are not using idempotency here. Okay, we are not using idempotency in this particular training.
But we can use, right? But technically,
Why not? Of course, you can use that idempotency thing. Of course, you can use it, Vijay.
okay.
Because if you are going to store, see, idempotency is what? You are actually determining that this particular value of this particular column is going to be checked again and again when you are pushing the data from one system to another system. So if you want to store a particular data, if you want to store a specific data, then you can use object store for that. If not, then whatever logic that I'm going to write, I will be writing it in my select operation, like here. So here I'm going to write a logic that if my idempotency value is not equal to any value of the values which are already pushed to another system. So I can write the query here also. It depends from use case to use case, which I actually.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So, but in this particular training, we are not implementing idempotency. It was just for the knowledge purpose. I have uh, helped you understand what is the difference between the ID column and watermark column. Okay. All right, so this is my store operation. Now what will the store operation do? It will store the value of the maximum value of account ID every time the synchronization will happen. So whenever the synchronization will happen, again the Jamboard. So right now if there are 8 records, then 8 will be the value of my watermark. If 12 records are added, then 12th number, I mean 12th ID will be the value of my watermark. So this is how the watermark value will keep on updating itself. Okay. Now let's talk about retrieving of data, because during the later synchronization you need to retrieve the data that you have stored, and then you have to do the comparison, and based on that comparison you are going to do your synchronization again. So for retrieving, you will use the retrieve operation that I'm going to put just before the retrieving of my actual data that I need to move from one system to another. Okay. Again, I'm going to use the key test, and first time synchronization you have to start with the default value, because naturally first time synchronization, when you are going to do, you are going to move the entire data from one system to another system. So it has to be 0. But for the later synchronizations, you need to retrieve the value which this store operation is storing. And that we are going to do using the target variable. Okay, let's say I give the target variable name as test. Now see, I told you, right, that when you use this object store component, you do not need to do any kind of configurations. So when I say payload over here, this payload is nothing but the payload which the store operation is storing, which is the maximum value of account ID. So the job of this retrieve operation is to retrieve the value which is stored by the store operation and retrieve it through a variable. The variable name is test. Okay. Now using this value, now my select operation, I'm gonna modify my query. Select star from accounts where my postal is equals to value of the specific postal, and my account ID should be greater than the value of my a variable, the value that you have stored, that is the value of the watermark. Correct. And what is the value of this test? Let's fix it. So my test will be equals to vars dot test. Can I say that? Yeah. So whatever value that you will store in this particular variable, your account ID should be greater than this particular value. Then only the synchronization should happen. Correct. If I'll show you the diagram again, see, right now, if you take the first example, first time synchronization, 10 records are there. What is the value of my watermark? It is 10. Second time, if the system has more records, which I mean more than the records which you have stored in the watermark value, which is 10. So right now it has two new records. So 12 is greater than 10. Correct. So when 12 is greater than 10, it means that we have two new records that needs to be pushed from first system to another system. So then what will happen? The data will be pushed, and again what will happen? The new watermark value will be moved from 10 to 12. If the data is not greater than the data that you have stored in the watermark, which means the highest timestamp value is not greater than the value that you have stored in the time watermark, then the payload will be 0. The data will be 0 that needs to be pushed from one system to another system. Same logic you have written over here. Select star from accounts, which is my table name, where postal is equals to the value of postal, and your account ID is greater than the value that you have stored in your variable.test, which is the value of your watermark. Okay, till this point, any questions with the logic that you have written, the query that you have written, anything? Okay. Now see, this is a conditional statement that we have written, correct? This can be true, this can be false, right? If it is true, then naturally you have to store the new watermark value, transform the data and write it into the file. But if it is false, you cannot go with the same rule. So here you can apply a choice router. So I'll quickly apply a choice router. I'll do the when operation when my payload value is not null, when my payload is not empty, which means I have some data that needs to be pushed from one system to another system, which means my account ID is greater than the value of the watermark. But if not, then it should go to the default. And in default, let's say I'm simply writing a message that no new records are added. Correct? Let's fix the when block. In when, I'm going to write an expression that my payload should not be empty. So what I can do, I can use one is empty function where I'm going to check the payload size. Okay, you can see it. Why I am giving this particular logic? Because if the account ID value is greater than the watermark value, you have some payload value, right? Your payload is not empty. But if your watermark value is equal to the highest timestamp, your payload is empty. So if the payload is empty, it will go to your no new records. And if there are new payloads, then what will happen? New watermark value will be stored, the data will be transformed into the correct format, and you will write it into the file. The synchronization will happen in the simple language. Okay, I hope I'm making some sense. Okay,
Yes, Ankita.
okay, perfect. So now let's, I think the code is already written, we can quickly test it. So I'm gonna stop my current project and we are going to run it again. So let's debug it, because that's the reason we have chosen a particular postal code, so that it would be easier for us to debug. So we are going to debug it. Since you have made some settings, clear application data will prompt. We will say yes because we don't want any conflict. I'll say yes to it so that I don't want any data to be stored beforehand. Okay, let's see. Oh, I did not do one thing. One second. See, there is one more thing, okay? Both the flows that you are seeing right over here, they both are pointing to the same database, isn't it? One is the select operation pointing to the same database, on table row pointing to the same database. Plus, this is a scheduler activity. So no matter what, this particular flow will run once the application will deploy it. And the moment any new record will be added to my database, automatically this flow will also get initiated, right? So currently we don't want that. So what I'm going to do, I'll go to this particular flow scope and I'll change the initial state to stop, so that even if my application will be deployed, I don't want this flow to be triggered. Okay, so let me quickly debug the application now. Okay, do you want to clear the application data? Yes. I don't want any conflicts, of course. Yes, I will delete it. Okay, yes, let's start the debug mode. I've changed the setting of my mule debugger, I mean debug perspective, so that it should look clear. Okay, my application has initialized. You can see it over here. Okay, it has started to. All right, you can see the debugger is responding. Okay, this is the first time synchronization we are doing, right? So what will happen? See, your test value is 0 because you have actually started off with the default value. Now this select operation will make a call to the database to see if we have some data related to a specific postal code. So yes, we do have. See, there are two payloads which are already there. Can you see this? Right? So these are the two records related to the specific postal code which this select operation has pulled out. So since my payload is not empty, see the size of payload is 2. It means my payload is not empty. So what will happen? It will go to my when block. Now in when block, this store operation will store the value of the maximum account ID, correct? Maximum value of the account ID. So if I click on next, okay, here I have seen many people get confused. If you'll see the variable, your test is still 0. Okay. Just understand one thing. This value of variable will be changed by the retrieve operation. You have created this variable in the retrieve operation. I have seen many, resources, they get confused that this store operation has already stored the value of the watermark. Then why it is not visible over here? Because this is not the value of the watermark right now. This is the value of the variable test, which is storing the value of the watermark. And currently, your retrieve operation has not been activated yet. And store operation is a part of object store, which is storing this particular value of watermark in the corresponding memory. For example, if you are using a standalone runtime, it will be stored in your file system. If it is Cloud Hub, it will be stored in your data storage. If it is shared runtimes, then it will be in the distributed memory. So currently your value is stored, okay, but it is not retrieved. That is the reason this test value has not changed. Okay. All right. Now what will happen? Whatever data that we have received, this is currently in Java format. As you can see, we would like to convert it into CSV format. You can see the file has been converted and we are going to write it in a file. Okay. Where is my file? Let's quickly check the file also. This is my output folder. This is my automatic watermarking file. Okay. So this is my manual. What did I do? I did not change the name here. Okay, it seems I have not changed the name. Let me see. Automatic manual.csv. All right, no problem. Let me delete this file. So just have this idea that your first time synchronization has happened. Okay, you can clearly see it. We have already seen it in the debugger. Both the files have been transformed. Okay, now this is the later synchronization. Now this time I have not added anything. So what will happen? This retrieve operation will retrieve the data that is being stored by the store object, which is 305. Can you see that? Now the highest value of your account ID has been stored as a watermark value. Now this select operation will again check the database to see that if we have any particular data which is higher than this particular account ID. See, no, I have not added any new record with the same postal code greater than this particular account ID. So my payload is empty. This was the concept of watermarking, isn't it? That first time synchronization, I would like to process the entire data from one system to another system. But for the further synchronizations, I would not like to go ahead with the duplicate processing of the data. Rather, I would only like to process the data which is newly added to my system. And the same thing is happening right now. Correct? Now, since the payload is 0, it should go to my default block and the data should be logged over here, which is no new records. Okay, now let me show you one thing. I'll stop this application. Okay, let me debug this application again. Let me go back to the design perspective. Let me debug this application again. But this time when I'm going to debug, when it will ask me to clear the application data, I'll say no. I do not want to delete my object store value. See, I have undeployed my application and I'm redeploying it, right? And what did we learn now? That your object store is a persistent component. It's a persistent module, which means that even if your system is getting restarted, even if your application is getting restarted, your data will be resumed. Your data will be persistent. Okay. So keeping that in mind, last time your object store value had stored the value of watermark as 305 and we have not added any new records. So ideally what should happen? No new record should be added, right? So let's figure this out. Let's wait the application to get deployed and then we'll test it. All right, see my application is now deployed. And now when you will start, this is the retrieve operation. See, it has started from the point from where you have stopped. Correct? It has stored the value of your watermark since the beginning. So this select operation, since we have not created anything, so naturally it will go to my default block because my payload size is 0. Now let's do one more thing. Okay, let me go back to my database where it is. Mm, did I close my database? One second, let me quickly open it again. Sorry, my bad. Okay, there you go. So this is my database. Okay, let me add a new account to it and my postal code should be 80202. So I'm gonna add a new record. Okay, this time let me name it as um, Mule, street name as Mule, postal as 80202. That was the idea, right? Street name, let's say Mule, state as Mule, and country as Mule. Let's click on save. Now the new record has been added. Okay, only one new record has been added. Okay, this part is clear. Let's resume. What is my retrieve? Operation is retrieving the same value of the watermark that you had stored previously. Now the select operation will do the comparison again, right? Now what is the new record? Okay, what is my new record ID? It's 311, correct? Now 311 is greater than 305, isn't it? So what will happen? The select operation will check for the data and it will see that yes, we have, okay, I think two new records have been added. 311 and 312 both are okay. One more record has been added. I don't know how. Maybe by mistake it has been added or somebody else has added. Okay, so two new records have been added right now with the same postal code. You can see it, but it is not repeating the same the previous records, isn't it? No 305 and 304. It's 311 and 3112, which are the new records which has been added to the system. Now, naturally, your payload is not empty, so it will go to your when block. It will store the new watermark value, transform the data into CSV and write it in your file. Now if you check the retrieve operation, see the new watermark value. It's not 305 anymore, it's 312. Okay, any questions? Does this make any sense? Are you guys able to understand the concepts of manual watermarking?
It was very clear, Ankita.
Okay, great. Thank you, Vijay. Anyone else? Any other questions? Okay, perfect. So this was it from my side. This was it I wanted to cover in today's meetup. We talked about fragments. Just to summarize, we learned about how to create a fragment and how to use it in your API specification and what are the advantages of using a fragment. Followed by that, we talked about watermarking. We talked about the concept of watermarking, which we actually incorporate doing the synchronization between two systems. We talked about how to handle automatic watermarking as well as how to handle the watermarking manually. Okay. All right. I'm done. Jitendra, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Ankita. Fantastic session. I think you have covered a lot of things, and I hope, like, the concept of watermarking and fragments will be clear for the people now. So, thank you so much, Ankita, for the awesome and the great session. Thank you. So, let me quickly answer your screen.
Sure, Jitendra. Done. Thank you.
Okay. So, guys, like today, we will not run a count queues. Instead of, we will run a manual queues, basically because our count master is not he's not here. So, like for that, we will run the manual queues basically. And sorry for that. I apologize. And like take a stand, nominate yourself for the speaker and a topic as well. And and these are the upcoming meetups. So like on 21st May, we have some Plex Gateway. We're going to discuss about a Plex Gateway. On 11th June, we will talk about something called a saga pattern, which is orchestration and choreography pattern. On 24th June, we have a something called service mesh. On 30th June, we have a something on EKS RTF, architecture and components. On 9th July, we have a something called banking. Like we have a some like industry specific topic, which is driving a digital transformation in the banking industry. Okay. So let me quickly start with the cues first. So I will just put the line. So yeah, it was a great session, Ankita, again. So thank you so much. So before I start with the cues, so guys, what I will do, a simple rule you need to understand, like if anybody have won the voucher in last 30 days, please, like it is, this is a request from my, don't go for the queues, because like you may, your voucher like may be rejected also sometime, like give a chance to other to win a voucher also basically. Okay. Then secondly, like whatever email ID you are providing to me, the training account must, training account, that particular email ID basically. Okay. Okay, yeah. Let me stop recording before I start with quiz.